My name is Michel. I'm the lead pastor here at the River in Forsyth, Missouri, and we'd like to take this opportunity to give you just a glimpse of who we are and what we're about. At the River, we exist to inspire and enable people to become fully devoted followers of Jesus for real and for life. The Bible tells us in Matthew 22 that when pressed by a lawyer, Jesus said the most important aspect of life is to love God and love people with all you've got. In today's fast-paced culture of isolation and division, we passionately believe that a relationship with God and with people are both so worth fighting for. Jesus is our passion, our obsession, and our motivation. Because Christ gave His all on Calvary, we give our best every day. We believe the church should be a beautiful expression of its people. We have been gifted to give, wired for work, and saved to serve. We don't just go to church, we are the church. Jesus didn't leave His followers with a religion. He left them with a mission. And our mission is to spread this Jesus movement everywhere we go and to the ends of the earth. We are the light in the darkness. If you're looking for a place to belong, a place to grow, a place to serve, please join us every Sunday at 9 and 11 a.m. Help us to inspire and enable people to become fully devoted followers of Jesus for real and for life.
We're safe to say Merry Christmas ahead of time. We are going to start our Christmas series. That will begin next week and run through the month of December. And then in addition to that, want to acknowledge the people that took time to decorate and make our lobby and everything look like that. So give it up for, I mean, they know who they are. You guys probably do too, but they did such a fantastic job. They always do every year. So our Christmas services, let's talk about that for a minute. They are different this year. On December 24th, as Christmas Eve, we typically would have a candlelight service. Well, we've combined that with our normal Christmas services. So that morning, Saturday, Christmas Eve, the 24th, we are going to have two services at 9 and 11. So if you guys would come, we're going to combine those two things. That's our normal Christmas service and our candlelight service that day. So mark your calendars. We're excited about that. It's a little different than what we've done in the past, but it's going to be something that we're going to be experimenting with. We're excited for you and your family to come and join us at that time. So the other thing that we need to throw out there is December 11th is a really busy day. That is our Baptism Sunday. So if you've been a part of one of those in the past, we love how we do that here. God has blessed us with the opportunity to have another one of these before the end of the year, so put that on your calendars as well. That morning we'll be doing baptism. If that's something on the other side of it that you're interested in knowing more about, then come talk to myself, Colin, or Paul, or Tony, or there's a sign up, but we'd love to know who you are and have a conversation with you about that prior to that day. Also, that is our day for our annual business meeting. So right after second service, if you're a member, you stick around. We're going to talk about our budget and all kinds of exciting things that day if you're around. Now, last week we gave you guys the opportunity with our Kirbyville Christmas trees. So some of you grabbed those cards first, and then again in second services, all of those disappeared so fast. So give yourself a round of applause, because that was fast. Like those people that grabbed cards. But no, on December 11th, those need to be wrapped and back here. And so between now and then, make sure that you shop for those kids. So we're excited about what we got going on this morning. So if you would, guys, stand up real quick. Give somebody a high five before we get into worship. Merry Christmas.
Starting the day with your customized alarm, falling asleep listening to Calm, routes to work on Google Maps, group chats on WhatsApp, podcasters, bloggers, influencers, vloggers, the one thing you must do to live longer. BuzzFeed headlines, climate deadlines, searching Google for answers, binge-watching TikTok dancers, tear gas placating the masses, organic food packaged in plastic, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the 10-year challenge, 2 essential steps to achieving a life of balance, $30,000 sneakers, robot teachers, Kim Kardashian's maternity dress, 3 vital habits that guarantee success, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, 4G, 5G, 6G, AI, VR, 360. I'm liked, I'm followed, I'm viral, I'm trending. Life unending in this kingdom of plenty. So why do I feel so empty?
Sandy at the bank. I'm calling to let you know that your account is overdrawn again.
Somebody said, ooh, you know that feeling, huh? Ooh, account overdrawn. How many here today, how many like music? You like music? Awesome. How many love music? Okay. How many can give or take music? You're like, give or take. There's a few of you, okay. How about, let's talk about genres today. We're in church, so somebody's got to like gospel. How many people like gospel music? Okay, some of you are lying. You're like, I'm in church, I have to say gospel, okay. How many like country music? Okay, we got a few of us. I knew that would happen. How many like blues? Anybody like blues? I always wanted to know, does Leonard Skinner count as blues? Because I like that, but I don't think it does. But how many like hip-hop? Any hip-hop lovers? Okay, a few of you, good, okay. How about rock and roll? Anybody like rock and roll? Yeah. You know, it's funny, rock and roll has like even different genres among it now. You know, like, you got the 70s. Anybody like the 70s? Anybody like 80s rock and roll? Yeah. How many like 90s rock and roll? Yeah. What's crazy is they're all classic rock today. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing, like classic rock when I was not that. But so growing up, I loved music. I say this often, but other kids, they had toys, like real toys. My toy was the radio. I loved the radio. I played the radio. I listened. I sang along with the radio. I loved music growing up. Today, I'll hear a song, and some of you can identify with this, but I'll hear a song, and it'll take me back to a place or a time or with a person or whatever. Just music takes me back. I remember moments that God would, like, place a song in my head, and I was like, I've never heard this song before. And I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I didn't realize that God was giving me the ability to write songs, and I didn't realize that. I'm like, I've never heard this song before. This is a really good song. And so but God was like giving it to me. But my struggle was I couldn't play an instrument, and God was giving me these songs. So I tried to pick up the drums when I was real little, and that didn't work. And in school, my dad made me play trumpet, and I wasn't very good at it, but he wanted to keep me in music, and God was giving me these songs, but I couldn't get them out of here. And then as an early adult, I started hanging out with like real musicians, not like what I was, but real musicians. And so I started dabbling in songwriting, and I had to rely on like other players to get these songs out, and it led to more frustration for me, and they weren't hearing what I was hearing inside my head, and so I couldn't translate it from here to there, and so it wasn't the same thing, and so I just became more frustrated and more frustrated. And then one day, I was visiting my in-laws in a small town called Alma, Arkansas, and I'll never forget it. And on the bed of this band was on a flatbed trailer in a church parking lot, and they were singing some acoustic worship songs, and I will never forget, it was the first song that I ever learned on the guitar. And after these guys were done playing, I walked up to them, and I was like, I love that song that you played. Tell me about that song. And they said, well, the song is in the key of G. And he's like, can you play guitar? And I go, no, I can't. And he goes, well, it's easy. Let me just show you. So I'll never forget, he showed me this chord called the G chord. Isn't that pretty? I mean, it's a simple chord. A simple chord, and so many songs are written in the key of G. And just playing that, like, songs pop in your head, right? Like some of you right now, you're hearing a song that is in the key of G. Maybe your song is, we both lie silently still in the dead of the night. You know what I'm talking about? Though we both lie close together, we're still miles apart inside. Though it's something I said or something I did, but the words now come out right. Though I try not to hurt, that's a D. Though I try, well, I guess that's why they say, y'all ought to be ashamed of yourselves. We are in church, and we should not sing songs like that. I'll never forget, though, this guy showed me this song, and he showed me the key of G, and I was like, that's so cool. I'll never forget the song. To this day, it was the first song I ever learned. He showed me how to play a G. He showed me how to play a D. He showed me how to play a cheater C, I call it. That's a C. And he showed me how to play an E minor. I'll never forget the day that this guy showed me the first song I ever learned on the guitar. I still remember the words. I was thinking about it in my office this week. And I will praise the Lord, leaving behind my sorrows. I will praise the Lord, giving him my tomorrows. And I will lift my hands and give him all that I am, and upon his word I will stand. It was a simple song, and it was the first song I ever learned on the guitar. And as I was reminiscing in my office this week, and hadn't played that song in years, and I thought about the key of G and just how, it's got such a harmony to it. When certain strings are pressed on the guitar, there's a harmony and there's a beauty to it, to the key of G. And in the same way, for us sometimes, that's life, where life just feels good and it's flowing in harmony, and it's like a good strum on the chord of the key of G. It just works. And there's days where we feel good and we feel like the key of G, and then there's other days where right? There's days where things are working, feels good, it's harmony, and days, you know what I'm saying? Days where we feel like we're full, just works, and days where we feel empty. Maybe on Sunday we feel full and feel complete, and Monday comes and it's back to work, and you know what I'm saying? I think that's why it's so important for us to know the difference between empty and full and what that feels like. And so today, I wanted to do this series called Empty. And that's why we're doing this. Today we're wrapping up this series called Empty. And as we search for this life of fullness, we still have to know that are we going to mess up? Sure, we're going to mess up in life. Are we going to mess up again? Sure we are. And I'm just so thankful for this thing called grace. And as the song and the saying goes, it really is amazing, isn't it? Grace. And so today we want to wrap up this series called Empty. And I want to try to speak to the person today who feels like they've messed up a lot. The person who feels like maybe they've gone too far. And maybe at a time you felt full, but now you're at a place where you kind of feel empty. You kind of feel like that bad chord hit. And today I would like to encourage us with three things that I think that can take us to empty if we let them. Three things, practical things that I want to help you with. I think that can help us. But first, I want to catch us up on what we've learned in the past few weeks. In the first couple of weeks, I talked about a guy named Abraham and a woman, his wife, named Sarah. And the first thing that we learned about them is in Genesis 11:30. It says, "Now Sarah was barren; she had no child." And we gained an understanding that when a woman in this time period could not have children, they were judged. When they couldn't have children, they were labeled and they were looked down upon. And I know that we don't do that today. We don't judge anybody. We don't label anybody. We don't look down on anybody today. But they did that then. But there was good news for Abraham and Sarah, because the Bible says that God made them a promise. And in Genesis 15:4, God says, "For you will have a son of your own who will be your heir." He told them, he promised them that they would have a child, and this child would be their heir. And God didn't stutter here when he said this. God didn't misspeak. He made them a promise. But then something happens to them, and I think that it happens to us as well. And it's the first of three things that I want to share with you today. Number one, we become empty when we listen to people who don't listen to Jesus. You and I, we will become empty when we listen to people who don't listen to Jesus. Now, even on the surface, we can look at that and we can say, well, that's some solid advice right there. Don't listen to people who don't listen to Jesus. But we're about to journey through some scripture that might get a little uncomfortable to some of us today. And I don't say that it's going to get uncomfortable because it's difficult for us. I say that it might get uncomfortable for some people because we've created a church culture that is too afraid to teach on some things. I think we created a church culture that's too afraid to read some scripture on Sunday morning because maybe it seems too risque to talk about in church. And it makes some people uncomfortable when we talk about it. But these things, they really did happen, and so we really should talk about it. These things really are in the Bible, so I think we really can learn from it. But let's be honest, it makes people uncomfortable. There are people that I know that have not known Jesus for very long, and they will look at a story like we're going to read today, and they'll go, wow, that's in the Bible? I did not know that. But then some church people might look at the same story and go, hey, listen, I know that that happened, but it doesn't mean we have to talk about it. And I say, yes, we do have to talk about it. It's in the Bible, and so today I'm just going to read the Bible. You can't get mad at me. It's just in the Bible. I'm just going to read this story. It's in Genesis 16, starting in verse 1. Here goes the story. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. Now, if you're with child today and you got a girl coming and you're thinking of a girl name, let me help you out. Don't kind of steer clear of this name, Hagar. I don't think it's the name you're looking for, but a couple of weeks ago, we read that Abram did a real dumb thing when he took his focus off of God and he focused on his fears. And what happened next was he allowed the king to sleep with his wife, and it was a bad call. And we couldn't let Abram off the hook here, but today I'm going to say that we can't let Sarah off the hook either, because look what happens in verse 2. So Sarah said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Abram's like, okay, if you say so. I mean, you just say that I should. I'm going to. Now, it's easy for us to look into the lives of Abram and Sarah and see that this is not a good thing, right? This is not a good thing, what we're about to see. This is a bad deal. This is a mistake, right? And it's pretty easy for us to know that this is not going to go well for them. But I want you to see something that we really haven't touched on in this story of Abram and Sarah. Abram has a relationship with God, and it doesn't mean that he always makes good choices, because it's clear that he doesn't. He made a couple of bad ones. But Sarah, I'm not real sure that she has a relationship with God. As we've read already, Abram has talked to God, and God talked to Abram, and they're communicating with one another. But at this point in this story, Sarah doesn't have a communication. She doesn't have a connection with God. And we just read that she believes that God is holding out on her. He's preventing her from having children. And maybe she bought into the lie that society was screaming at her. Maybe she bought into the lie that God was somehow mad at her, that God had cursed her. And so as we just read, she's not looking at God and saying, oh God, I know that it's all in your time. God, I know that I'm going to have a child, and I know that I'm in your hands, God, and you've got me, and you care about me, and you want good for me. This is not what we're reading about Sarah. We're reading that Sarah feels like she's robbed from God. And so there's clearly no communication and no relationship between Sarah and God in this moment, just Abram and God. Oh, Sarah knows about God through her husband Abram, but she doesn't know God at this point in her life. And even though her intentions might be really good here, her intentions are to give her husband Abram a child, her choices aren't really good, are they? And so now she's leading Abram, her husband, to make a decision, and this decision was not one from God. God did not tell her to do this. And we know that that's not a good thing. And we know that the enemy, he will tempt us, right? We know that. We know that the enemy is not a creator. The enemy is a deceiver. God is the creator. Satan is a liar and a deceiver. And so the enemy, if he can't create something, he'll deceive something, right? And so check this out. The enemy will use things that we give him to deceive us. Have you ever thought about that? The enemy, he just uses things that we give him to deceive us and manipulate us. See, the enemy is not all-knowing. The enemy is not all-powerful. Those are God qualities. Satan can only use what we give him. He can only use what we show him. And then he will try to use it to destroy us. And here's what else we know. The enemy might use something different to tempt you than he will to tempt me. Why? Because you and I are different. But in life, we will judge other people because they sin differently than we do. Matter of fact, often we use the standards of our own life to judge someone else, don't we? We use the standards of our own life and how we live and how we see things in order to judge someone else and their life. And that's really easy for us to do, isn't it? Isn't it easy for us to say, well, I sure wouldn't do that, but they sure are. And that's easy for us to do. It's easy for us to say. Now, keep in mind that Sarah is not twisting Abram's arm here, was she? She's not, because we know the whole story. We know that it wasn't long ago that Abram pimped out his wife to the king. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. And now Sarah throws out this idea for him to sleep with her servant so that they can have a baby. Maybe they wanted to hurry up God's plan a little here. Oh, we know, God, that you told us that we're going to have a baby, so we're just going to kind of hurry this along. And so Abram's like, all right, that sounds good to me. And we all know that for us in life, the enemy will tempt us with something that he believes that we will agree to. And if we agree to it, it will give us temporary satisfaction in a moment. Let me ask you a question. Was Abram satisfied here? Yes or no? Yeah. He was temporarily satisfied. And the enemy will always tempt us with something that we can almost justify, can't he? In Abram's case, maybe Abram's saying, well, you know, I am a man. I have certain needs. Abram in this case can say, well, we don't have children, and Sarah, you can't give us children. And so this was your idea, Sarah. Just want to say this was your idea. And so I'm just going to do what you tell me to do, Sarah. But look what happens in verse 3 of this story. So Sarah, Abram's wife, it's just reminding us again that this is Abram's wife. Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan, where God had called them. So Abram is now 86 years old. Verse 4 says, so Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Now, I'm so glad that Colin kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of this last week. Talked about sex. I'm so glad that we're not afraid to talk about this in church, right? Because for years that wasn't the case. And while the church was too afraid to talk about stuff like what we're talking about, society as a whole has no problem talking about it. Seriously. And the media, when the media gets a hold of it, they take it even further. To the point where now a portion of our society can't even figure out how this works. I'm serious. Now a portion of our society has questions like, well, what exactly is a man? Do you ever think we were going to arrive at this place where a portion of society will go, how exactly do you even define a woman? And then all of a sudden, some people want to call women birthing persons. I'm not making this up. This is a real thing. We can't even decide how this works, and so we're going to call people birthing persons to fit it all in. I'm like, no way. No way. Let's get real. We all know how a baby happens, right? a man and a woman have sexual relations and a baby happens. And we just read about it in the Bible. So don't get mad at me, okay? Whoever said the Bible was boring, right? And yet society, they've made this all weird. And if you and I in church say that this is how a baby is made, a biological man and a biological woman do a biological thing and they create a baby, then all of a sudden we're weird. But my question is, why should we apologize for this? Listen, people are so quick to go, I just follow the science. Just follow the science. But they just refuse to follow the biological science because they're too distracted following the political science. And following the political science will always lead to the same place it always has, a place called hell. It did so in the Bible. It continues to lead people to hell today, and nothing has changed. And so I'm just going to stick with the biological science. You good with that? Just what the Bible says. I'm just reading what the Bible says. Verse 4 says, but when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. Now, let's backtrack a little here. Whose idea was this in the first place? Sarah's, right? Sarah's. So let's read on, verse 5. Then Sarah said to Abram, this is all your fault. Abram's like, hold up, I just did what you told me to do. I don't know. So she goes on, verse 5. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show us who's wrong, you or me. See, the problem was he listens to somebody who didn't listen to God. Now, you would think at this point in the story that God would look at Abram and God would say, listen, dude, I have tried with you. I have tried, but you just don't get it, man. I called you out of the place you were judged. I called you out of the place you were labeled and looked down upon because you couldn't have children. Abram, I promised you this land called Canaan. I promised you that I would give you a nation, and then you went to Egypt and you tried to pimp out your wife, and then I brought you back from Egypt, and now you go and do this. You would think that God would look at Abram and say, Abram, you know what? I just can't do it anymore. I've tried, but I'm done. And we all know what that's like, don't we? We get frustrated with someone because we have tried and tried and tried to help them, but they won't listen. We've tried to give them our advice, but they won't take it. We've tried to do that for them to do what we've told them to do, tell them to do, and we try to get them to do it, but they just can't get out of their own way. And so you know what? We get frustrated, don't we? And so you would think in reading this story that God would get frustrated with Abram here, right? But then in chapter 17, 13 years later, chapter 17 says, verse 1 says, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. Serve me faithfully and live a blameless life. I will make a covenant with you by which I will guarantee to give you countless descendants. And so here's God saying, hey, I haven't changed my mind about you. Here's God saying, I haven't changed my plan for you. I haven't changed my mind about you. You are my child, Abram. You will always be my child. There is a plan that I've set in place for you. There is a purpose that I've given you. There always has been, and nothing that you can do or nothing that anybody else can do will ever change that. God's looking at Abram. He's saying, I know that you've been through a lot, man. But my plan has not changed a bit. The blessings that I have for you are still there. The blessings that I will do through you for other people, they are still there. And that, my friends, is called amazing grace, is it not? Amazing grace. And so let's be honest. We don't like to wait on God, do we? We don't like to wait on God. God has been promising Abram a son for 24 years. Can we admit that 24 years is a long time? It's a long time. How about a healthy dose of perspective here? 24 years ago was 1998. Bill Clinton was our president. The number one movie in 1998 was a movie called The Water Boy. You can do it! Some of you are like, I've never seen the movie. You know what? You're not missing anything. Speaking of not missing anything, 1998, a band called Aerosmith, a song came out called I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. In 1998, Lauryn Hill's song, Lauryn Hill, her name was Lauryn Hill. She had the number one song at that time, Do Wop, Do That Thing. 1998, Celine Dion had a song called My Heart Will Go On. Remember the movie Titanic? Depressed us all. There was always room on that door for two people. But no, she just let him drift away and let him die. 1998, that was a long time ago. 24 years ago. And God made Abram a promise 24 years before this time. And let's just admit, as we read this story, it's been a rough 24 years. But I want us to see something in this story. God made Abram some promises at a moment in his life when Abram was seeking God. But now, 24 years later, Abram is not exactly seeking God, is he? But God is seeking Abram. That's amazing grace. Maybe Abram is not seeking God, but God is seeking Abram. And I can say that about myself too in my own life. The place that I am today, the physical place, the spiritual place, I am here not because I was holding on to Jesus the whole time, but because Jesus was holding on to me. I'm not here and who I am because I've followed the Lord completely for almost 48 years of my life. But I am where I am because God pursued me. And I think that we need to hear this today. God is pursuing you. He's never given up on you. That's why you are here today. He's never stopped loving you. You have not gone too far for Him. He still has hope for you. He still has a joy for you. And He's holding it and He's waiting for you. And all you have to do is turn around and take it from Him. He's still there. I think we need to hear that today, which leads to my second point today. Number 2, we become empty when we doubt that we can become full. You and I can become empty when we doubt that we can even become full. I've told you this before about me, but my knee-jerk reaction in life, my knee-jerk reaction, my sinful nature is negativity. It is. It's my natural state. It's my sinful state. I am a pessimist. I am a cup is half empty kind of person. But because of the person of Jesus, when I die to myself every day, I'm able to become an optimist. Because of what Jesus did for me and how I look at what Jesus did for me and how He saved me and He's had amazing grace for my life and He's shown me that amazing grace, I become an encourager to other people. But it's hard and it's work for me. Every day I have to work at that. And here's what I've discovered about myself. Here's what I've discovered about our society. Today, we have filters. And I know what the unfiltered me really looks like. And it's not very good. Right? And one of the tools that the enemy uses for me and he uses for you is this tool called comparison. And I call it the comparison trap because it's a trap. And it will trap us every time. And when we constantly compare ourselves to other people, when we look at somebody and go, well, I could never do that. When we compare ourselves, I could never be that. I could never look like that. I could never become that. And the problem is we live in these filters in life. Listen, we're driving down the road and we see a billboard with food on it and we're like, oh, that looks good. Right? And seeing that food makes us hungry for that food. But the food on the billboard isn't even edible. It's wax. I'm sorry to ruin your day. How messed up is that? That we look at something and go, wow, that looks really good, and it's not even edible. We are not realizing that life, listen, when we look at that person And we say, man, I wish I could be like them. I want their life. We're not really realizing that their life, they have worked their whole life for. We look at somebody and we go, I want their body. But that person goes to the gym every day, and we don't. We look at somebody and go, I wish my marriage could be like their marriage. But we don't see that literal hell that they've been through to get to that place in their marriage. We're filtered. We're filtered. We can see family pictures on like social media, and all the kids have brushed hair, and they all have $1 million smiles, and they're all standing upright, and we're like, oh, I want that. Their kids are so happy. Listen, their kids are not happy. Their kids are drunk. Their kids are jacked up on NyQuil. You know it. You know it because you've done it. Before that picture was taken, those parents convinced those kids that they were not feeling well. Do you have a fever? I think you have a fever. Here, take this. No, I'm fine, Mom. No, just drink it. Just drink it, the whole bottle. Drink all of it. So that they can sit there in the picture and smile. They're just, ha, ha. They're drunk. They're not happy. Everybody say cheese. Cheese. They're slammed. And don't act like you haven't done that. Seriously, though. We live in a filtered society. And we become empty because we will doubt in ourselves that we will never have what they have. We will become empty because we doubt that we will never become full. We will never become, and we're like, oh, man, if I could just have that, I'll never have what they have. And we get caught gawking at other people's highlight reels, which, by the way, is all that's on social media. We never post the times that we almost crash our cars, or we almost crash our families, or we almost crash our job. We never post that, do we? We always post the highlight reels. And you and I, we get caught gawking at other people's highlight reels while we're depressed about our blooper reels. And you know how the enemy defeats us? Exactly like that. Every day. So back to the story. Now, eventually, in this story, the focus finally gets to Sarah at a moment when she is finally walking with God. And God changes her heart, and God changes her name. And he changes Abram's heart, and he changes Abram's name to Abraham. And so now Abraham is having a conversation with some people the Bible calls visitors, these visitors that come visiting their house or their tent, if you will. In chapter 18, Genesis 18, verse 9, it says, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" the visitors asked. "She's inside the tent," Abraham replied. Now watch this. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening to the conversation from the tent. Now, maybe you and I will look at this and we'll say, man, Sarah sure is nosy. Why is she listening through the tent? I will argue that she wasn't nosy. I think she was working her mom's superpowers. And she's not even a mom yet. But God knew she'd be a mom, so he gave her those mom superpowers. You know what I'm talking about when I say mom superpowers, right? Y'all, your moms, you can hear something and you'll be Tennille will be in another room in the other side of the house, and she will hear every word that me and the boys say. It's like supernatural hearing. The kids are like, "Dad, can I?" And I go, "Sure, whatever, I don't care." And Tennille goes, "I've already told them they couldn't." And I'm like, "How did she hear that?" And the kids are like, "How did she hear that?" She's superhuman. God has given her superhuman mom powers. And I believe that. And I believe that we're seeing that right now with Sarah from the tent. She heard what the visitors were saying. And then verse 11, it says, Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. Now, don't miss this. Don't miss this. They're both old, right? But let's not forget that Sarah was the one who couldn't have children, right? Remember, Abraham, he already had a child with his servant Hagar. And then verse 12 says, so she laughed silently to herself and said, listen, I'm just reading the Bible. I'm not saying this. She's saying this about herself. She laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such a pleasure? Especially when my master, my husband, is also so old. The Bible says she laughed at herself. She laughed at herself. Why? Because she doubted that God could complete her. She doubted that God could make her full when she felt empty. And maybe in this moment she's thinking, you know what? I'm just meant to be empty. I will always be empty. I will stay empty. I will live empty. Now, did she believe that God could use Hagar to have children? Of course she did. Because Hagar was young. Because Hagar was beautiful. But she wasn't in her mind. And we do that too, don't we? We do that. You're here today and you're hearing that God loves you. And you're hearing that God is pursuing you. And you're hearing that God has great plans for you. And the only thing holding you back is you. And we do that. Sarah, the Bible says that Sarah laughed. She laughed. Verse 13 says, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Now, this next part, we need to remind ourselves daily of this. This is what I do. Verse 14, is anything too hard for the Lord? Fair question. Is anything too hard for God? Is anything too hard for God? And I get stuck here sometimes in this place because what I call impossible, God calls possible. And the Bible proves that you can go through a fiery furnace, and when Jesus is with you, when you go through that fire and you get out of the fire, you don't even smell like the fire. Why? Because He is God, and that's what He does. The Bible proves that you can be in a den full of lions, a room full of lions, and when God is done, you can name the lions. You can put a leash on the lions. You can take them for a walk in the neighborhood. Why? Because God can tame any beast. The Bible proves that when you're in a storm, you can be on a sketchy, shaky, old broken down boat, and you can learn that you don't even need the boat. You can walk on water. Why? Because Jesus walked on water, and He said, we can know that God has robbed graves, God has killed giants, God has tamed animals, God has calmed storms. So why wouldn't He do what we doubt in him that He can do? Why wouldn't He do it? Nothing is impossible for God. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Nothing is impossible. Nothing. Some of you believe it. Thank you. The others, I'm not sure what you believe. Nothing is impossible for God. Nothing. So God is kind of calling Abraham and Sarah to the carpet here, and He's like, nothing is impossible for God. Verse 14 says, is there anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Now, this next part is so funny, and it's true for us too. Watch this, verse 15. Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, nah, you did. I didn't laugh. Yeah, no, you totally did. Isn't it funny how God calls us out of our insecurities? Isn't it funny when it comes to our insecurities, we try to lie to ourselves, we try to lie to other people, but we can't lie to God. Friends, when are we going to stop lying to ourselves? That God will, we believe that God will never work through us. Why? Because we're too old. God will never work through us because we're too young, we're too far gone. God will never work through us because we're too lost, or we're too quiet, or we're too loud, and we're just lying to ourselves. And so, I have to point out here in this verse, was Sarah pursuing the things of God here, or was God pursuing Sarah? God was pursuing Sarah, while Sarah was doubting God. And that's exactly why we call it amazing grace, and it leads to number 3 today. When we become empty, we stop taking steps of faith. When we become empty, we stop taking steps of faith in our life. But when we stop lying to ourselves and we remember what God has promised us, when we stop lying to ourselves and we remember what God can do and what He's done before and He can do it again, and we begin to take steps of faith in our life, God goes to work. Do we realize that sometimes all we have to do is move a little for God to move big? Sometimes all we have to do is move a little for God to move big. Just a little step, just one little step of faith. Abraham and Sarah, they had been married for a while, right? And so they had already done what married people do, right? And so to have a child, They just have to do what they already knew, right? Last week, Colin shared a story of Cain and Abel in the book of Genesis, and he shared from the book of Hebrews. And in Hebrews 11, this is known as the Hall of Faith. The Hall of Faith, where in Hebrews 11, it's pointed out that all of these people that had faith in God, and God moved in their lives. And it's called the Hall of Faith, and it lists all these people that had so much faith. And Colin shared how Abel had faith in God to accomplish what he would do. And as I was reading what Colin shared last night, I saw this about the faith of Sarah in Hebrews 11, verse 11. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. Now, that verse doesn't tell us about the time that she doubted, does it? Just shows us the faith that she had. Did she believe God at first? No, she doubted. She thought she was too old. She thought that she wasn't enough. But what did she do? She took a step of faith. One little step of faith, and God moved big. She took a step of faith, and she made it to the Hebrews Hall of Faith. Genesis 12 goes on, it says, the Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he promised. Even though she lived a portion of her life without God, God did what he promised. Even though she made mistakes, God did what he promised. Even though she doubted, God did what he promised. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. Verse 2 says, she became pregnant. Now that took a step of faith, didn't it, for her to become pregnant? God said, I will provide the miracle, but you have to take a step of faith yourself. And maybe they said, but God, we've done this. God, we've been married for years, and it hasn't worked. Why do you think it's going to work now? God, we don't have any children. And God said, just keep doing it. Just keep doing what I provided for you. I'll provide the miracle. You take the step of faith. Don't you feel like that sometimes? Like where you say, God, I don't feel anything. God, I've been praying. God, I've gone to church. I read my Bible, and I don't feel anything. God, I do the same things every day of my life, and still I feel nothing. Let's not forget that they didn't see God's promise for 25 years. But then in verse 2, the Bible says she became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And in the same way, your miracle, that thing that seems impossible to you, is entirely possible to God. And it will happen when he wants it to happen. It will happen in his time. And his time is always the right time. It won't happen in your time. It won't happen in my time. It will happen in his time. And here's another thing. We think that we can screw it all up, don't we? God has this big plan, and I can mess it up. I make one small step out of order, and I can mess it all up. Listen, all that God has planned, you can't mess up. I'm sorry, you're not that good. You can't mess it up. You're not that powerful. She became pregnant. Verse 3, and Abraham named their son Isaac. The name Isaac means laughs. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. So this was a bad day for Isaac, but I'm sure he got over it. And then, you'll get that later. Abram was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. See, at first, when she couldn't have children, they judged her. When she couldn't have children, they labeled her. When she couldn't have children, they laughed at her. And then God shows up, and now they're laughing with her. And in the same way, the people who have doubted you, someday will celebrate with you. Why? Because God's that good. He's that good. Verse 7 says, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse a baby, yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. Because God pursued Abraham and Sarah, and because they took steps of faith, God made a miracle for them. And if he did it for them, why wouldn't he do it for you and I? I said earlier, I was telling you earlier when I started this message, that God placed the gift of music in my heart and in my soul, but it was years later that I even picked up the guitar. And ironically, it was like 25 years later. After God gifted me with the gift of music, my parents began to see it. I picked up the guitar 25 years later. And I'll never forget that once I learned these chords, G, D, C, E minor, someone showed me a song from a guy, maybe you've heard of him. His name's Chris Tomlin. He's a little known guy. And this song is so easy to play. Matter of fact, there's a YouTube out there of somebody asking Chris Tomlin about some of his songs. And they're like, how did you write that song? And he goes, the same way I write all my songs. They're all in the key of G, every one of them. He's like, listen, I'm not a guitar player. I just write my songs in the key of G. And as he's talking, as somebody showed me this song was so timeless and it was so powerful, but it was so easy. And somebody showed me how to play this song, and here's why I love this song, because it's my story and it's your story. It's a story of amazing grace. And Chris Tomlin wrote this song called Amazing Grace. Can we sing it today? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fear relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. I love this next part. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Sing it again. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Amazing grace. It's amazing, isn't it? Amazing grace. Man, I'm thankful for His amazing grace today. And this story reminds us that He has grace for us. And that when maybe we don't feel like we're pursuing Him, that He pursues us. It proves that He's always coming after us with amazing grace. Can you pray with me today? Father, thank you for your grace. God, when we didn't deserve it, you sent Jesus. God, when we didn't deserve it, you sent love in the form of Jesus. And God, what we're getting ready to go into in the month of Christmas is remembering and singing songs about your grace. That God, though we sinned and though we fall short, you send Jesus to us. and the perfect form of a perfect baby. God, you're so good, and your grace is so sufficient. We love you today. It's in your name we pray. And we all say, amen. Hey, join us next week for Christmas. Come back in the Christmas spirit, and we will see you next week.